Okay, I think we're live.
Excellent.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, so a quick intro for me. My name's Anuj Desai. I host Europe's leading cannabis industry podcast called the Cannabis Conversation. I'm also founder of Canverse, which is a commercial and legal consultancy helping entrepreneurs, businesses, and investors navigate the emerging cannabis industry. Very pleased today be presenting at CBD Live, and I'll be chatting to Deepank Utkere from Vantage Hemp. Welcome, Deepank. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
No, real pleasure. Where in the world are you today?
I'm in Greeley, Colorado. It's a little town 1 hour directly north of Denver in Colorado.
Very nice. Very nice. We'll get on a bit more about why you guys are based there in a minute. But why don't we just kick off with a bit about you? Why don't you give us a brief intro of yourself and your background?
So my name is Deepank Utkere. I'm the COO and one of the founders of Vantage Hemp here in Colorado. My background comes from pharmaceutical. I was about 22, 23 years in pharmaceutical manufacturing, formulation and process development. So I would come from a very GMP-based background. Developing a lot of finished formulations for the treatment of ocular conditions, skin, and some sustained release delivery systems. So that's my background. Myself and 4 other Canadians are founders in Vantage Hemp. We got together, and when the Farm Bill Act of 2018 made hemp legal in the U.S., we saw a great opportunity to jump into the CBD market. We started this project in 2019, and over the course of the last 2 years, we've taken a project from dirt to fully operational and producing high quality CBD extracts and CBD isolates.
Fantastic. Coming from the pharma industry, I always like to ask this question: How did you find that switch into CBD and cannabis? Did you encounter any stigma at all?
No stigma. It was a bit of a culture shock for myself. Coming from pharma, I'm used to, boardrooms and people, suits and ties and a very different atmosphere. Switching into the CBD cannabis space, there's a lot of neck tattoos and and dressed down, kind of really relaxed, more atmosphere. And also because Vantage, we really kind of focused on extraction. So whereas in my previous life in pharmaceuticals, I worked on finished products. I never dealt with any of the raw materials coming in to make our active pharmaceutical ingredients. In this, where we are now, I'm dealing with farmers to get the hemp, our raw material, bringing it in, extracting it, and producing these raw materials that go on to finished goods at other manufacturers.
Yeah, and there must have been quite a steep learning curve to.
Very steep learning curve. Yeah, I went from mixing things in a vessel to using, for the most part, very dangerous processes, using high pressure, flammable solvents and large quantities of flammable and explosive solvents to produce our extracts. It was a very steep learning curve, but it was really enjoyable. It was really fun.
Yeah, I find just the constant learning one of the best things about being in this space. But and what sort of, as you mentioned, pharma is quite different. What are some of the experiences and qualities that you learned in the pharma industry that you've taken into this new space?
I think that the biggest thing that I've taken from pharma into this is 2 things. One is the GMP aspect, really applying GMP principles to this facility and this industry, in terms of controlling all your processes, bringing in qualification of equipment and validation of equipment, so that you ensure consistency and reproducibility in your finished goods. documentation, training profiles, training matrices to ensure, people who are doing the job are doing them properly and are trained to do that job. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things I brought over from the pharmaceutical aspect into Vantage. The other aspects, they are different, but they're still just processes. They just require other considerations in terms of safety and operator safety. Whereas, when you're taking an aqueous solution and you're dissolving salts in it, or your API in it, and then filling it into vials, fairly innocuous. But when we were setting up our processes here, one of our processes is liquid propane extraction. So it's an extraction process. It's a process. You just have to you have to bolt on some other things around it, like put it into a special room, have proper monitoring for solvents and gases in case there's a leak. It's all about worker safety, but the process itself, we're applying the same principles in terms of controlling, if you're running at -10, what are your proven acceptable ranges? Can you go from, if you're at -5, is that still an acceptable product? If you're at -15, is that still an acceptable product? So understanding that parameters around which you produce good quality extracts, you're applying the same principles. So that science-based and data-driven process control is consistent across the industries.
Yeah, and much needed, I think.
Very much needed, yes. I mean, that was one of the first things that, when we back in 2019, when we were designing this facility and going to vendors and, doing all their research, there's very little available. And there's still, for the most part, is very little available. What you end up with is vendors telling you what they do. And when you ask them, well, why do you run this cycle? It's always, the answer we invariably got was, well, this is the way we've always done it. Or, Bob said this is the best way to do it, so that's why we're doing it this way. And you're like, okay, wait a minute. But how do you know this is the best way? They had no data or anything to support that statement. So, when we set up, it quickly became apparent that there's not a lot of data available. So we changed we had to change our design a little bit, and we installed an analytical lab so that we could do an analysis of our products to see, when we change parameters, how does the extraction efficiency change? How does the end product change? That is something that we took very seriously, and we have a vast pool of data that tells us exactly what our extraction efficiencies are, how changing parameters affects the quality of our extracts and our overall efficiencies.
Brilliant. Well, that neatly segues into talking a bit more about Vantage.
Yeah.
I think you've kind of told us a bit about sort of why you created it. But what exactly do you do at Vantage, and how do you kind of set yourself apart from some of your competitors?
Right. So at Vantage, we've rather than be vertically integrated and the jack of all, master of none, we decided to be the master. We wanted to become the master of one part of that process, and what we took on was extraction, and the production of the extracts needed by other businesses to create their products. So we took on the initial extraction of cannabinoids from hemp, the purification through winterization, then distillation, and also crystallization. So that's our primary focus. And when I indicated earlier, we put in an analytical lab. Well, that analytical lab is only for our internal use. So that's for process monitoring and process control and process development. It's not for release of our final product. That we go to a third-party lab, because it's very involved in terms of validation of all your methods, equipment, everything. It just doesn't make sense for us to have that internally. So we have that only for our own internal use. Also, with the amount of there's not a lot of trust in our industry. So if we were to produce an extract and then say we tested it and said it was good, there's not a lot of people who would say, yeah, we believe that.
Not your own homework, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we go to a third party, qualified vendor to provide that testing. But here in Greeley, we have two buildings with a total of 60,000 square feet. Um, and there's two principles that we designed them on, and we built them from the ground up. They're purpose-built buildings. They're not, we didn't retrofit into a building. We built them purposeful for our process. There's two principles that we use. One is GMP for manufacturing. The other one is safety. We spent a lot of time in terms of the design to ensure safety was built into every part of the process. So, we have our CO2 machines, they have CO2 sensors around them that are tied into our fire and alert system. And, if there's a leak, no one's paying attention. And if the levels start to rise, there's two levels. There's an alert level and an alarm level. At the alert level, it basically says, hey, something's wrong. Let's look and see if we can fix it. And if it continues to increase, it goes to our alarm level, which basically means everyone out of the building, the fire department's going to come and deal with the situation. GMP principles, we put in, gowning procedures. Our purification facility is set up more like a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility than an extraction facility, in that each room has its own ventilation system. Each room is specific for a process. So winterization is in one room, distillation is in another room. So it prevents cross-contamination of products or mixing up of products. And it keeps everything separate so that when you're doing distillation and you take that material out, that goes into inventory as a product, and that's controlled as one batch and one process. So it's controlled through a batch record, and then it goes into inventory. Once it's in inventory, it sits there in quarantine and in a quarantine area, so that no one can take it until it's release tested and released for the next step of the process, whether it's sale or whether it goes on to crystallization to form our final product, or it goes out for remediation if someone wants broad spectrum distillate.
So quite tightly controlled processes then.
Very tightly controlled, yes. We just finished, we had SGS, a fairly well-known worldwide auditing firm based out of Switzerland. They they came in and audited us over the course of 4 months, 3 different audits to ensure and confirm our compliance with not only European GMPs, but also World Health Organization, FDA, 210 and 211, the relevant parts of that. And most importantly, the ICH guideline Q7 for the GMP manufacturing of active pharmaceutical ingredients.
Right. Wow, some very high standards. It just occurred to me, given that you built this sort of purpose-built, was location important in where you?
Very, very important. So when we started looking at locations, the 5 founders are Canadian, but the Canadian market already had marijuana approved. We saw the U.S. market in the approval of hemp as a large market, so we decided to set base in the U.S. And we picked Colorado because Colorado is the most mature, just overall cannabis market, whether it be marijuana or hemp. It was just the most mature market, the most forward thinking in terms of regulations and how they governed marijuana as a whole, cannabis as a whole. So that's how we selected Colorado as our primary location. And we picked Greeley because it was we visited with a few jurisdictions. It really was the most welcoming. They were willing to work with us in terms of getting approvals. And we had a fantastic relationship with the building inspectors, but more importantly, we had a fantastic relationship with the fire marshal. That was the Greeley fire marshal actually was the fire marshal for all special projects within Colorado. We had regular meetings with him. We discussed, and like his most important, for him, the most important criteria for him was not only safety of our operators, but also safety of first responders. So everything that we design in collaboration with the fire department to ensure that they were happy. And we were fortunate. They were very pragmatic in the application of both the International Fire Code and the International Building Code to apply to this project.
Sure, sure. Cool, thank you. And just before we come on to the wider topic of sort of industry compliance, what's Vantage's USP, if you like? Why do you think you guys are going to win versus your competitors?
Sorry, say it again.
What's your kind of, you know, USP, if you like? Why do you think you guys are going to win as opposed to your competitors?
I think the biggest thing is just control and reproducibility. Our processes, our overall procedures are set up to meet the highest levels of GMP. And if you look at what's coming, you know, CBD, as much as it is a, you know, everyone's using it just, you know, kind of as kind of an add-on, almost what's the word I'm looking for, like homeopathic kind of remedy. The big thing I see coming forward is CBD. It has pharmacological effects, and along with that, and it came to the forefront with Epidiolex's approval in the U.S. as a drug. It does have associated toxicity, so that's something that needs to be addressed. So I think what you're going to start to see is a lot of these regulatory agencies start looking at how do we control it, but still allow for kind of overall accessibility to the market. There's some pretty significant unanswered questions like interaction effects. You know, there is a whole, you know, system and receptors within the human body that are specific to cannabinoids. But when, you know, if you have that and you're on other medication, how do those two interact together? And that's going to take a lot of clinical studies and a lot of time and money to actually address those issues. And how these regulatory agencies approach it is up in the air. Like the FDA still really hasn't decided what they're going to do with CBD. Their biggest thing that they've said is you can market it for right now until we have our final rule, but just don't put any claims on it. And that's the only thing that they're enforcing right now. So, you know, but you can see that they have to, you know, CBD is approved as a drug in the US. And as such, it's very unusual to have something that's approved as a drug, but also available just over the counter. Like I liken it to penicillin. You know, penicillin is great, but you need a prescription to get it. You'll never see like water with penicillin in it just to treat whatever ails you. You know, it's that sort of thing.
Yeah, so, sorry, you go.
Yeah, sorry. So the FDA and regulatory bodies are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. The biggest thing is, you know, if Epidiolex's studies, there's toxicity studies showed that there was no safety concerns, it would be a non-issue. But the fact that there are safety concerns and toxicities associated with CBD, that does raise some concerns for regulatory bodies, because their ultimate goal is not only to approve efficacious drugs, but also to ensure the safety of the public.
Yeah, consumer protection, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's move on to compliance. And you know, you mentioned GMP a couple of times.
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be good to sort of explain that. But maybe before we go into the detail, you know, what is it? Why are rigorous standards so important, you know, in this industry?
Well, I think that it's important across all industries, but when we're talking about human health, it is the most important, because it's the consistency of the product that you produce. Not only when you say, you know, it's 99% pure, it actually is 99% pure, but also to ensure that any other contaminants within that do not, you know, cause any safety concerns. I mean, we're using a lot of solvents and gases, hazardous gases during the extraction process. You have to ensure that they are completely and totally removed to at least a safe level. If you have contaminants in there, that could affect safety. When you say it's 99% pure, it has to be 99% pure. It can't be 80% pure. It can't be 75% pure. It can't be 90% pure, because your formulation that you produce is based on that purity. And if that purity is off and you formulate your product, that results in, what's the best way? It results in, a poor consumer effect, right? That's why, if you look at the market right now, you're going to see, some people, I like this brand versus this brand, or this brand doesn't work, or, I found this brand to be the best. And it comes back to, consistency of the product and the quality of the product. It has to be the, of the utmost importance when you're producing these products for consumer use.
Yeah. And then, so maybe we will go on to the standards that are employed. I mean, I think, would it be fair to say that the European sort of standards are slightly higher than North America? Maybe.
It's, I don't know if it's higher, it's different. Like, they put emphasis on different things.
Maybe we talk about the differences. Would you be able to sort of give us a few?
So the European standards are slightly different in terms of microbial, in terms of the GMPs. They have a little more importance on that. They have slightly different, requirements for cleanliness and how you set up your facility. But if you start going through, as much as, the ICH, International Committee on Harmonization, try to standardize, a set of GMPs for everyone to use, every country has their own little quirk, nuance to those GMPs. And you just have to ensure that you kind of meet the highest level at each country that you're interested in going into. I mean, there's a good chance you're not going to be able to meet every requirement, but meet most of them.
Yeah. And what's some of the biggest challenges in sort of achieving the GMP compliance?
I think that it's the cost, really. Cost and careful planning right from the start. You have to ensure, like, if you're retrofitting a facility to be GMP, it's going to be a much harder process than if you start from the ground up. You have to allocate, costs and dollars associated with ensuring that you have proper cleaning procedures for not only your equipment, but your facility itself. Like, you're cleaning on a regular basis, and you have to put in a monitoring program to ensure that you have to prove that your cleaning process is effective. You've got to ensure that all your equipment meets, when we say GMP, it's kind of a nebulous term, but, meets requirements that, it's the product contact surfaces are compatible with what you're using. So, is it electropolished? Is it passivated stainless steel? What grade of stainless steel? Even down to like gaskets for connections and the type of connections. You want to minimize, any threaded connections. You want to use tri-clamp connections because those are cleanable. Threaded connections are very difficult to clean. So you have to ensure that, you put all these, these thoughts and processes in place so that, you have a process that can meet these GMP standards for cleanliness, for reproducibility. You have to have, when you say you're running something at a specific temperature, you have to ensure that those, the equipment that you use for monitoring it is on a, is calibrated, first of all, and that it's on a regular calibration schedule so that you confirm that it is in calibration, that when you say it needs to be at 30 degrees, it's actually reading 30 degrees and you can actually rely on it, that it's measuring it accurately. Wow. And that requires like that's an annual or every 6 months, depending on the type of sensors and what type of sensors you're using. You have to do it on an annual basis. Other thing, and then, when you look at safety, those are done on every 6 months basis, because you want to make sure that, that relates to the safety of the facility. That's done on a 6 month basis to make sure that your sensors are reading properly, that they're reading accurately, to ensure that, they're not either reading falsely low or falsely high. They're giving you accurate results to ensure safety.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite searching and comprehensive. I imagine. I guess it's what you were talking about before, in that you almost need to come from that mindset, because if you haven't, I mean, going to that level of
Yeah.
sort of scrutiny is quite difficult to transfer to that. But coming
Right.
from pharma would make
It is very different. Yeah, it's a mind, and that's the best way to put it. It's a mindset that you have to instill from the start. It's not something that you can slowly bring in. It needs to be, you don't want to just do it slowly over time. It's something that needs to be thought of right from the start in terms of the design of the facility, because it can be difficult to do retrofit GMP into a non-GMP facility, because you may have to build a gowning room, you may have to change air handling systems, you may have to change flooring, because regular vinyl tile, that's not cleanable. You need something that's a continuous surface, so that you can actually clean it properly.
Yeah. Wow. And where a Vantage in the regulatory process? Have you achieved all of the various certifications?
So we've achieved. So as I mentioned earlier, SGS, the auditing firm to Switzerland, they came in and did a full GMP audit of our facility and our procedures, and gave us our certificates that says we're compliant with WHO GMPs, ICH Q7 GMPs, and FDA CFR 210, 211. We're currently in the process of coordinating with Malta to have them come in and do a GMP, a regulatory audit for Europe, for our facility.
Wow, brilliant. Cool. So, as we sort of close out this bit before we take some questions, maybe we can look at some sort of, crystal ball gazing, and in particular in relation to Europe, maybe. What sort of CBD products do you think will be popular in the sort of European medical and wellness markets?
I think there's probably gonna be two classes of compounds. There's gonna be the stuff that the kind of over the counter, like tinctures. I think are gonna be very popular. Balms and salves, just for aches and pains. I think we're also going to see a lot of drinks come to market, like sports drinks. One of the things that that CBD is known to do is be really good for recovery after working out or training or anything. It helps kind of keep the inflammation down, some of the aches and pains associated with that inflammation. So I think what we're going to start to see really, and I think it's going to start to really dominate the market, are sports drinks, or those Gatorades, kind of those energy drinks. This will keep you awake and help with your aches and pains. Kind of that kind of combination of products. I think that's going to really see a dominant profile on the market.
And do you see, it very much being an ingredient and being combined with other different types of, ginseng, for example?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the nice thing about CBD is you can combine it with other things. And I think we're going to start to see a lot of that.
Any exciting ones you've seen that you think?
I mean, I've seen some with turmeric to help with, inflammation and pain. There's, I don't, none really just come to, a prominent one comes to mind, but this market is now set to explode, because one of the big issues with CBD is it's not water soluble. So there's a lot of companies that are looking at, I'll put in quotations, water soluble, but what they are suspensions. So they're basically dispersions, emulsions, suspensions of CBD within some sort of kind of oily matrix that creates, small particles, whether it's nano or slightly larger micron-sized particles. The problem with that, though, is you do have this inherent stability issue, because it will flocculate, it will fall out of solution, it will settle. So one of the things that we're working on is a truly water soluble CBD with through a chelation complex. So that once we have something that's truly shelf stable and doesn't cause some precipitation where you have to shake it up before you drink it, I think that's what the market is waiting for, and we hope to be at the forefront of that very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a real game changer to be able to get it properly into beverages with proper bioavailability from water solubility. So look forward to that. Final sort of question, what do you think the European market is it? Do you think it has an advantage over other emerging sort of regions?
Sorry, say it again.
The European market has any kind of advantages over other emerging regions?
No, I think the European market is not, not to say it's not special, but it's not special. It's special, but not in that way. I think the market is hungry for CBD and CBD products. Everyone knows the benefits of it, but they do need a good consistent supply. They need quality manufacturers to bring these to market. I think the days of past are where you have these mom and pop shops that are producing just small quantities and putting it on a shelf and selling them online or something. I think the inconsistency associated with that is high enough that you have a very poor consumer experience. Mm-hmm. I think where it needs to go is I think it needs to go into pharma or these larger kind of consumer-based products where quality and consistency are going to be guaranteed. And that way, you will have a consistent product on market. You can rely on it and you can trust it. I think that's probably the biggest thing that the regulatory bodies kind of need to wrap their head around, is building this trust in the products on market. So for the regulatory bodies just to say, as long as you don't have a claim on it, you can market it. I don't think that's the right approach. I think the approach they need to take is they need to look at, are they producing it in a acceptable facility? Do they have the right checks and balances in place to ensure that their product meets the quality requirements? I know there's a number of small companies that are producing products. They can't afford to do any testing, so they rely on their supplier of the API to provide that testing. Well, then if that initial supply is not of sound quality, then it's just going to get produced into their products, and then it goes out into the consumer marketplace. So those checks and balances just need to be there, and I think that's the approach that the regulatory agencies should take. It shouldn't be, and I think if they went to the absolute pharmaceutical end where they're going to require everyone to do clinical trials and show that their product is efficacious, I think that's too far. But I think some level of oversight is needed, and just to ensure that when you say it's being produced to GMPs, it's not just something that someone's saying, it's actually being produced to GMPs.
Absolutely. I think, as with most things in this space, education is sort of key, and the regulators are sort of playing catch up, aren't they? Because I don't think they really know what good looks like. So
yes, exactly.
Hopefully that would change. Now I'm going to throw it open to the crowd. So bear with me for a sec. And so I've got one from Anonymous. Your transition to cannabis space sounds fascinating. Do you ever miss your pharma days?
That's a good question. I kind of do, because I was doing kind of the final goods of manufacturing, and we were doing clinical studies, and we had commercial products, so you got to see the effects of them. Being one step back from that, you're kind of making this stuff, and other people are converting into final products. I do kind of miss that aspect of it. The rigor to which GMP is applied to final finished pharmaceutical products, I don't miss that at all.
That's a good and honest answer. That's great. Thank you. Got one from Neil Cartwright. One, do you grow your own hemp or do you buy it in? And two, does the quality of hemp differ depending on whether it's grown outside, inside, type of soil, amount of sun, etc.?
Yeah. So we do not. We try to get into in our first year while we're building the facilities. We try to get into growing hemp. Hemp is a beast to grow. It is a very finicky plant. It is not an easy plant to grow, and you can't use. So when hemp was approved, people started growing it, but there was no equipment to grow and harvest hemp, and they the hemp farmers used other equipment used in for example in harvesting wheat or harvesting corn, and thinking that they could just use it, but you can't. It's hemp is such a fibrous material, it clogs any augers. It is such an oily material. When it builds up on the inside of tubes with augers, it turns into concrete and it'll destroy motors. It's taken a long time. So we've kind of left that to the farmers. The farmers produce the hemp, they harvest it, and as long as it meets our quality requirements, we will buy it from them. And probably the smartest decision we ever did. The first year of when we were growing hemp, I think we're kind of still suffering PTSD from that. It was such a horrific experience that we just don't want to ever do it again. And what we found is, the people who jumped into hemp growing because they thought they could make a quick buck. So the investment bankers and people thought, people were getting $20 a pound, $30, $40 a pound for hemp. Those who jumped into it, those are the ones that have failed. The ones the farmers that we're dealing with now are the generational farmers. They know what is important, what isn't important in growing crops as a whole, and they've just applied it to hemp, and our life has become so much easier. So they've taken that on, and we've left it up to them. So we've basically said, whatever you deliver to us at our back door has to meet these quality requirements. And absolutely, the where you're growing it, how you're growing it, the soil it's growing in, the fertilizers you use, all have a dramatic impact on hemp. Hemp, one of the big things is hemp is a great bioremediator. It sucks everything out of the soil. So if you've had a previous crop on there that used heavy pesticides on it, it will suck that out of the dirt. So you will get that in your crops. Colorado has lead in its soil. And so you will often get hemp, which it's still within allowable regs, but it will have lead in it. Less than about 1 ppm of lead is routine. The nice thing with extraction, though, CO2 and hydrocarbon both are non-selective. They non-selective in the sense that they leave all the heavy metals behind, and your extract is effectively a tenfold reduction in your hemp in your heavy metal content.
Right, brilliant. And just while you're on that, do you have a preference for indoor or outdoor?
The preference we don't. It's really all about quality. What's in the bag when it's delivered to our door, doesn't matter whether it comes from inside or outside. You will end up paying a lot more for indoor grown hemp, just because of the cost required associated with it. It is probably easier to achieve organic status with that than it is outdoor. But for us, it really doesn't have an impact on us, to the point where we're not even looking really at strains or anything. It's what's in the bag when it's delivered to us. And what's really driving our process and our efficiencies and the quality is that it meets our requirements for heavy metal, pesticide content, and microbial, and that it has an acceptable level of CBD in terms of per pound. And what we've seen is anything less than 6% is really not worth extracting. It's just too costly. So we're looking for above 7%.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think last question would be, From Russell Cafferty, do the rigorous regulations, particularly in relation to ICH-Q7, help normalize CBD as an alternative to pharmaceuticals?
I think what it does is it normalizes CBD, period.
Would you mind just telling us what Q7 is, actually?
So Q7, so ICH is what it stands for is International Committee on Harmonization. Basically, what it's a group that has gotten together and is trying to set global standards for various GMP aspects. So Q7 is one of their documents that's specific for active pharmaceutical ingredients. And active pharmaceutical ingredients is basically so if you've got a tablet for heart medication, the actual drug in it is the active pharmaceutical ingredient. So the Q7 is a set of regulations governing the GMP aspect of manufacturing that drug. So what we've done is we've taken that guideline and applied it to Vantage hemp. So when we look at what we produce here, we don't consider ourselves a botanical or an extract company. We consider ourselves an active pharmaceutical manufacturer. So when you look at that, I think by applying a set of global standards. So if you go to the FDA website and you type in, FDA GMP guidelines on for active pharmaceutical ingredients, you'll get a document this is the FDA guidance document, and basically it's a cover page, and underneath it is the Q7 guidelines, and you have to follow those. It's the same thing with Europe. Europe has applied this Q7 guideline to their active pharmaceutical ingredients. So what that does is it provides for a benchmark. This is the minimum level of compliance you need to achieve GMP for what you're producing. And that gives, the person at the end of the chain there, the one who's, one back from the consumer, one who's actually manufacturing the product, it gives them assurance that you're producing under appropriate GMPs.
Okay, cool. Brilliant. Thank you, Deepak. That's been really illuminating and very useful to hear about how you guys are getting on and what you're up to. And I love the approach that you're taking in relation to this. So all the best with everything. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a great pleasure.
Likewise. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great day.